Village McGonigal.
Nothing close by.
No.
1 through 8.
And most of those were in Tom's letter anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
I looked at one or two, I thought maybe it was interesting that,
Yeah.
you know, they go all the way to Madison Road.
Yeah.
Would have been nice if they had a, you know, something in Berlin or Washington.
Tom, you won't be able to see this. It's broadcasting clean, but up there, that's what.
They're taking overnighters.
Oh,
I didn't make it down again.
Oh, yeah, name on all the time.
Yeah, yep.
I don't know if that's on the
A name.
Oh, sure, you have to, I don't know.
See it, then show up there too.
Yeah, I'm at 59, so we can't go through all.
No, yes.
Then you go back to the reading.
You make the motion, I'll second it, we'll.
Go back to the original stuff, the paperwork.
Some things are.
Back
Well, it looks like that.
Yeah, forward.
That they're gonna
Yeah, this was not to make it.
Because it's substantially changed, and the recommendations from the town should be reviewed in the time, so that happened. Doesn't matter because the rezone, because your rezone already goes through to them. So when,
Oh, yeah.
when is their plan?
One of the road's crappy. I came from Waukesha. Joe from Waukesha. Man.
Ah,
Four-wheel drive, just the other day.
really? Yeah,
Oh,
so you
yeah.
have to close you around.
Yeah.
It's a really bad accident on
I still
Maple.
almost got hit.
Really bad accident on Maple.
They're probably going too fast.
There's a car in the, way down in the ditch on 164, just as you
Yeah,
come up on the big hill, and then as you go towards that property there, I couldn't even see it. There was a squad car there and a tow
As
truck,
a sort of,
but there was
they're
no
on
car.
specified use
So
for the
way
plan.
down there, we slid way down the hill.
Really?
You're gonna have to cable that one out of there. We finally get a chance to put a name to a face.
Is this the
We
first
see all the
time?
paperwork
Is this
come
the
through,
first
but we
time
never.
we've had name plaques?
Oh,
We
yeah.
did yours purposely today.
Oh,
And you met
that's
Amy
nice.
before.
Thank you.
Has she been here before?
Yeah, she came to talk about conditional
Oh, she's been
usage.
asleep.
It's been a long time. It's been quite a while since I. Well,
He
other
usually
than
has
that-
sleeping
other than-
dreams.
Tendency to do that. If the meeting goes past
You
8
mean my
o'clock, I usually
presentation
nod
was
off.
Right on.
my presentation didn't have you at the edge of your seat?
Pardon?
My presentation didn't have you at the edge of your seat?
He couldn't hear
Yeah,
it.
you were, that's right, you were the
Yeah,
one that,
yeah.
now I remember, yeah.
Did you hear him fall off in his sleep?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she was really good at that.
You gotta shake your computer real quick. Supervisors, you ready?
Sure.
Nope. No, we just opened it.
Merle, you want to move over? Closer to Bill?
It's on the screen.
Everything. Amy, are you ready?
You ready?
Sean's not.
Does Amy have a microphone?
Yes, she does.
Okay.
I'm ready. Is it on?
You gotta turn the little button where the red light shows.
Is it on green?
It says it's red. It's on.
Oh,
but
yep.
It's red.
Yeah, it should be. I'm sorry, it's red. These are green.
No, where'd Sean go?
Here he is. Sean, you ready to do the opening song?
Sure.
You ready, Sean?
Yeah.
Madam Clerk?
I'm ready.
I've got 6 p.m. Town of Vernon Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission joint meeting. Come to order for Wednesday, April 10th, 2019, 6 p.m. All rise for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Chairman Thomas Bird,
Present.
Supervisor Jeff Millies.
Present.
Supervisor Gary Wildy.
Present.
Supervisor Ed Moline.
Present.
Supervisor Bill Craig. Commissioner Merle Wagner. Sean Malarkey, Town Planner.
Present.
Amy Barrows, Senior Planner, Waukesha County Parks and Land Use. Mr. Chairman, note for the record that you do have a quorum of your town board and a quorum of your plan commission.
All right. I'll read the notice here. Notice is hereby given that a joint public hearing will be held by the Town of Vernon Plan Commission and staff representative from the Waukesha County Department of Park and Land Use on Wednesday, April 10th, 2019 at 6 p.m. at the Town of Vernon Hall to consider the request RZ 35 for John Stiegler, Yankee and Yankee and Associates, 711 Westmoreland Boulevard, Suite 1, Waukesha, Wisconsin, to amend the district zoning map of the Waukesha County Shoreline and Floodland Protection Ordinance from the A2 Rural Home District to the R1 Residential District in order to accommodate two 1-acre family residential lots on a portion of the property owned by Heaven City Development Corporation / Ralph Hibbert. The property is described as follows. Part of Lot 2, certified map number 9385, volume 85, page 222, located in the part of the northwest one quarter and the southwest one quarter of section 19, town 5 north, range 19 east, town of Vernon. More specifically, the property is located at South 91, West 27850, West National Avenue. Immediately following the above noticed public hearing, another public hearing will be held to consider the request CU 22 of John Stiegler, Yankee and Yankee and Associates, to reduce the acres that is subject to an existing conditional use permit from multifamily use legal non-conforming use status and for the temporary sale of fireworks on an annual basis on a portion of the property owned by Heaven City / Ralph Hibbert. Property is described as same as I just read above, and then it says notice is hereby giving that a public hearing will be held. Yeah, should I go into that one, Sean? Should I read that too, or you think that that should be read after the first public hearing is?
That would be the town's component
Yeah.
of the public hearing, so we can wait.
Yeah, okay. So, with that being said, we'll open the public hearing at 6:05. Anybody would like to speak yea or nay? Please come up. Or you want to read first what they want to do, Amy? And
Go ahead.
yeah.
So this, the property or area to be rezoned is part of the Heaven City property, which you're probably all familiar with, north of County Highway ES and east of the Fox River. So Mr. Hibbert has several structures that are located off of ES that are used for various reasons, which we'll talk about during the next hearing. But on the northeast end of the property, he's got some vacant land. And he originally came in to propose 2 3-acre lots. I believe you guys saw the original certified survey map. When he came in to visit the county, we had recommended that he reduce the lot acreage to 1 acre in order to save some significantly steep slopes and primary environmental corridor. The 1 acre lot size does match the northern lot, which was sold off several years ago to his son, I believe, to build a new home. And it also matches the adjacent residential lots in the Hidden Lake subdivision, which are located to the north and east. The Hidden Lake subdivisions are actually zoned R2, which allow a minimum of 30,000 square foot lot sizes, and the proposed 2 lots are proposed to be zoned R1, which requires a minimum of 1 acre and 150 feet in width. So by reducing the lot size, he does preserve the corridor and the steep slopes, and he also provides additional acreage in an outlot, which will be either owned in common by him as part of the multifamily use and commercial use, or in the future, he may transfer that ownership to a public or nonprofit agency for open space preservation purposes. And that those steep slopes, woodlands, wetlands, floodplains along the Fox River are really valuable lands. There are also archaeological mound sites along the river, which is a unique characteristic to have on the property. And even on the north side in the wooded area is an old village campsite. So there may be artifacts that are found beneath the ground there also. The county's land use plan has the area designated as low density residential, which requires a minimum of 20,000 square feet to 1.4 acres per unit. And then environmental corridor, and then there's business in the area where his operation occurs. The town's land use plan does have the acreage in the business category, so it's my understanding that you guys are going through a comprehensive land use plan amendment right now, and so that will hopefully be brought into your amendments as you go through your public hearing process during your next meeting, and Sean can talk about that more if needed. I think I already said the intention of the two lots is for single-family purposes. And I do want the town to just think about the park and open space plan of the county does have the acreage along the Fox River designated as local ownership, which we proposed by the town. If you're not comfortable owning it, or you don't think that you're the right entity because it is intended for future village land, down the road, we could contact a nonprofit agency. The Waukesha Land Conservancy is usually interested in this type of land as well. But it's definitely a worthwhile property to consider for some form of common or public nonprofit ownership. Other than that, the only other comment I have is we did talk to our Environmental Health Division. Because they went from 3 acres to 1 acre, we do want to make sure that the lots are suitable for a septic site. There's no reason to not think they wouldn't be. But one condition that the county will place on the rezone would be to have, to make sure that each lot is suitable for septic. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Annie.
I just would add a couple other points. As Amy did mention, the original certified survey map was approved by the Plan Commission Board in January of this year, but it was substantially different. It was 2 3-acre lots, now there are 2 1-acre lots. Also, there's 2 separate outlots now, one outlot for the stormwater management area, and then the separate outlot that Amy mentioned for preservation, and the remainder would be for the Heaven City development to the south. So I think the town attorney has also recommended that the Plan Commission and Board review that one more go around to formally reapprove it, since it is substantially different. That could happen at next month's meeting. It wouldn't necessarily hold anything up because we are still waiting for the rezone to go through the full county process, and then we're also waiting for our comprehensive plan to be amended, the public hearing of which is next week. So all this will kind of tie together in the next couple of months. That extra approval would not be a big deal on the certified survey map. So one condition of to add that is not currently in your packets for the rezoning would be to add the comprehensive plan amendment for those 2 lots from commercial use to residential use to match the subdivision to the north. When it was originally proposed, when the certified survey was originally brought forward, that land is currently zoned A2. So the 3-acre lots that were originally proposed wouldn't have required a change in zoning or a comp plan change, because we wouldn't be changing the zoning. Now that the zoning is going to be changed to R1, we just want to make sure our comp plan would allow that.
With that being said, we'll open the public hearing. Anybody with comments, please come up.
I have
Please come up.
question. Basically, you've given everybody a survey, but not a plot map per se. That I don't know specifically where these lots are. I live in Hidden Lakes, my property adjoins Heaven City. And quite frequently, when they expanded the residency there, we had trouble down along our properties with a lot of kids vandalizing things. And even 3 days ago, neighbor had the cops there because there was 7 or 8 kids breaking into his shed. So I'm a little concerned just where these lots are gonna be,
Sir,
specifically.
excuse me, what is your name, sir, and your address?
I'm Richard Hansen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hanson. And you live on
I'm Wagner Court.
Wagner Court. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Richard, I'm happy to just share my CSM with you. You can have this. And so the 2 lots are on the northeast corner of his overall development. So here are all of his commercial multifamily buildings. They're both directly adjacent to the end of the cul-de-sac of Lakeside Drive, on the east side, away from the natural area. So you'll see there's natural areas on the northwest side of his property. The northeast side is open and vacant and more like a field. That's where the 2 lots are.
Look at the TV right now. I think it's shot.
Okay?
It's broadcasting.
My case address, Mr. Hanson. I've owned the property going on 32 years. We never had any kids living there.
You shouldn't be.
Ralph?
Well, I don't know where they come from.
Just hang on.
Should address the plan commission.
Well,
Mr. Hanson, you have anything more to add to that? Mr. Hanson, do you have anything more to add?
No.
Did you get a letter?
Yes,
Was he
I got
one of
a
the
letter,
ones
but I didn't.
that had a letter?
It is said basically where it was a survey, but not a map, and I did not have any understanding where these lots were.
Okay.
Yeah, the notice says to contact a representative to get the site plan information.
All right. Any other comments?
I'd like to address the board. My name is Kurt Dew, Yankee, and I wanted to just make one potential correction on our petition, on the application. We classified...
Can you use the microphone so
Yeah.
people won't be able to hear
Okay,
you?
that's fine.
Is it on, Gary? Or is the little green light on?
It's on.
Okay.
It's on.
I can hear. Just on the petition, the zoning classification we're requesting to change is from A2, which is current, to R2, which is the smaller lot size. And on your document, it says R1. So I want to clarify what that is, because I understood the R2 lot to be 30,000 square feet or less.
Yeah, it looks like you guys entered R1.
On my document, I have R2.
Oh,
I saw it in a couple of different places, but your lots are 1 acre, so that requires R1.
Okay, so you changed the classification. Is there an impact to tax or zoning or additional tax on that?
I didn't change the classification. This is so you're requesting a rezoning through Waukesha County because this is county shoreline zoning.
Okay.
But just practicality, the lots that you have shown are 2 1-acre lots, which requires R1 zoning.
Okay.
he could, I mean,
He could do R2
could
if you wanted
propose
to,
either
but-
one. I think when we met with you, we don't prefer one over the other. The only,
I did file an R2, so I just want to know if there's a disadvantage to filing R2 versus R1.
well, it was noticed for R1. So,
Okay.
I mean, the town and county could make a recommendation for a different zoning category than R1. It looks like the application that was submitted by staff, it does look like they changed it to R1. I don't know if that's from meeting with you or...
That's right. The one I have signed says R2, so I just want to make sure that I'm not incorrect.
I don't know
Okay.
who came in. Did you come in to meet with our staff?
No, I did not.
Okay, do you know who did? Was it Ralph?
No. Ralph, did you make a change on the zoning recommendation? I don't think so. He just signed the document based on
Well, I don't think we can arbitrarily change it. What was noticed in the notice says R1. If you want R2, we'll have to stop.
I don't know who, I mean,
Okay.
It was taken by somebody else, but because the minimum lots that are proposed were 1 acre, they probably had a conversation about how if that fit R1. That would be my guess.
So I would only ask that Ralph just make sure that he can initial or confirm that he wants to keep an R1 designation. And I don't have a problem with that, I just want to know because it seems that was just an error either on our part and Yankee or it was just changed by the county.
The other consideration is the existing lot is R1.
Okay, adjacent to
Adjacent, yes, to the north.
And we talked to him about either, we were okay with either, because the lot to the north is R1 and Hidden Lakes is R2. So, and the land use plan meets both. It's
Okay.
either one works, but I can tell you both lots meet R1. They're both 1 acre in size and 150 feet in width. So it meets the R1 requirements.
Okay. All right, then I guess I just want to just make it known for the record that our document did file it as R2, but it was changed by the county to R1. That's all I want to clarify. And I think the other issues that we talked about, the next part in the CU, I'll wait for my response for that.
It might have been changed with, while sitting down with the applicant though, just
Okay.
so you know.
Yeah, I can't, sorry.
Okay.
I just had to ask. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I just want to, make sure this is for single-family homes, no
Sir?
multifamily?
Sir, can you come up
Oh, sure.
and state your name and turn into the microphone, please?
Yes. Terry Seelock, West 277 South 8945 Hilltop Lane.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, sir, what was your name?
Terry Seelock.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure, is this for single-family homes or multifamily?
Single family.
Single-family only? Because some of the wording was, in all the pages were kind of misleading. That's all I wanted to know.
Anybody else want to make any comments?
I'm good with it.
Anybody else want to make any comments?
John, you want me to note that for the record? John's in favor.
Yeah, I can give you my name. John Kubacki, 276-9075 Hidden Lakes Drive. I've been Ralph's neighbor for 22 years now. Clarifying what you did, the wording did at first because it said multifamily. I thought, okay, where is it going to be? So I did the ask, and I went to my neighbor as a good neighbor and asked, hey, where do you plan on doing this? They said in the cul-de-sac, single-family houses. I've never had an issue with somebody in my yard except for when we had the incident at the gas station when we ran through there, but could have happened to any one of our yards, so it could be me as the homeowner. So I've got no problem with Ralph developing this land.
And can I just clarify, since it's come up a couple times, there's 2 public hearings that are taking place. The first one is to rezone it from A2 to R1 in order to accommodate 2 1-acre single-family residential lots. The next public hearing is to reduce the acreage where he has multifamily on the area next to ES. So we're doing 2 separate public hearings with 2 separate requests. Okay, just to clarify.
All right, thank you.
Right, this is a public hearing on the first.
Yes.
Any other comments in the public hearing? Any other comments? All right, we'll close that public hearing at 6:20. All right. I'll read the next note, sir. It says, notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held immediately after the joint public hearing by the Town of Vernon Plan Commission and staff, representative of the Waukesha County Department of Parks and Land Use, by the Town of Vernon and the Town of Vernon Plan Commission Wednesday, April 10th, 2019, at the Vernon Town Hall. To consider a Town of Vernon's legal non-conforming conditional use permit for the reduction in acreage that is subject to an existing conditional use permit for multifamily use, legal non-conforming use status, and the temporary sale of fireworks on an annual basis on a portion of the property owned by Heaven City Development Company / Mr. Ralph Hibbert. The property is described as follows. Part of Lot 2, certified survey map number 9385, volume 85, page 222, located in the part of the northwest 1/4 and the southwest 1/4 of section 19, town 5, north, range 19, east, town of Vernon. More specifically, the property is located at south 91, west 27850, west National Avenue. So, Amy, you want
I
to,
think Sean.
or John, you want to?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do this one. So the bottom line with this one is that because of the certified survey map that's being proposed and the outlot that's being created for preservation and the 2 residential lots that we just discussed, the size of the remainder of the parcel that holds the business uses, the tavern, the vacant restaurant, the retail store, 18 apartments, and 3 different buildings, a detached garage, and 2 pavilions. Those uses exist via conditional use for legal non-conforming uses. Some of that property is zoned A2, some of it's zoned business. So that conditional use was issued originally in 1998. It's been revised over the years. In 99 it was updated, 2001, all the way through 2008, where all the various uses got added to the conditional use permit. So that all happened under county zoning when the property was fully under county zoning jurisdiction. Since the town has their own ordinance as of 2016, the vast majority of the property and certainly all the buildings on the property are under town zoning jurisdiction now. So because the size of the parcel is smaller, or getting smaller, it was originally 35.32 acres, including the land west of the Fox River. It's now being decreased in size to 16. Yeah, exactly. So because the property is changing, that requires the conditional use to be amended. Anything that happens with the property size or substantial changes to the use of the property requires the permit to be reissued. So the county needs to reissue their permit for the northern portion that's outside of the buildings because they still have a portion of that land with their jurisdiction. And the town, under our new zoning ordinance, doesn't have a permit, so we need to issue a permit in general for the property. So the staff report in front of you, with the help of Amy, we took all of the conditions of all the permits that were issued starting in 1998 and consolidated them into the conditions you see in your staff report. We've learned tonight that the fireworks operation is no longer on the property, so even though that's in my staff report, that can be stricken as a condition going forward. So nothing is changing with this particular property except the lots getting smaller, but the size, the difference in lot size isn't going to impede on any of the uses that are currently on the property. Amy, anything to add on that?
No, the only thing that I would add is that the original conditions for like the tavern, for instance, has special events that they're allowed to have on an annual basis, and they were required to submit their special event to the town, county, I think the fire department. We removed ourselves from those reviews because all of the buildings are now in the town zoning only, so we didn't feel that it was necessary for the applicant to come to the town and county. So there's several areas where there's annual type reviews where we took ourselves out of the conditions. So other than that, we just removed duplicative or irrelevant conditions from the historical files.
Okay.
So this is a nice way to take years and years and file that's this big and consolidate into one single report. So good opportunity to clean up records. And just one more mention, since it is notified or noticed as a legal non-conforming conditional use, part of that's because when it was originally implemented, well, the non-conforming use existed prior to ordinances, but the property is mixed zone between B2 and R2. But if you take just the B2 area, which is where all the buildings are, you take the acreage of just that, if you go to the county's ordinance anyway, I don't know how the town's ordinance reads, but residential is an allowed use in B2, and multifamily itself is allowed through a CU, and the acreage on this property in B2 would fit within our multifamily CU category. So even though it's a non-conforming CU, because it has been for years, it does comply with what the county's code would allow for just somebody who came in for multifamily today. So,
And the town's is the same. It's basically 15,000 square feet per unit, and so the language is the same. That portion of the conditional use isn't non-conforming.
so in the future, if he ever wanted to come in to make an amendment to the multifamily, he could probably take himself out of non-conforming CU status and move into more multifamily to get rid of that title. But for now, it works the way it is. But I just want to make sure you understand, it's really not all that non-conforming to or it's not non-conforming to modern day CU requirements.
Okay. Any comments? Any public comments from that? Anyone want to make any comments?
And I'm going to meet with Ralph next week so that the town, we're going to find all of the absolute latest floor plans and site plans. Well, Sean has the site plans, but the floor plans, and make sure the town has all of those current records.
Okay, last once more. Any more comments? For the public hearing? Okay, let the record show. We'll close the public hearing at 6:28. Well, we'll get into it when we get into the agenda items. Okay. All right. Miscellaneous matters. Following matters will be discussed and possible action taken by the Town of Vernon Board of Supervisors and or Plan Commission unless otherwise noted. Okay, item 8. Plan Commission recommendation to the Vernon Town Board to consider the request RZ35 for John Steiger, Yankee, to amend district zoning map of the Waukesha County Shoreland Floodplain Protection Ordinance from A2 Rural Home District. Now it says in here in the agenda, R1 residential district in order to accommodate 2 1-acre single-family residential lots on the portion of the property owned by Heaven City Development Corporation / Ralph Hibbert for the property is described on the agenda. So, Amy, Sean, you have any comments?
No other additional comments except, again, the only condition that isn't in my staff report I have 2 conditions. One is it's contingent on the conditional use request approved and approval of the certified survey map that's still out there. The other condition that I'd like to add is the comprehensive plan also amended to change the portion of the property where the 2 lots will exist from commercial to residential use.
Okay, this is Plan Commission. Plan Commissioners, any comments?
Sean or Amy, I don't know who wants that answer. The restaurant is now vacant. It's under legal non-conforming and conditional use, correct? Now, because the use has been discontinued, what is there, a 12 or 18-month period? If the use is discontinued, that drops out of that illegal use, correct?
Well, hold on. The restaurant use is actually permitted by right in B2. It's just all of the uses are rolled into the CU permit to be comprehensive with it, but the restaurant use in general is permitted by right.
Okay, so just the restaurant or other?
The restaurant and tavern, I'm trying to think, and retail store actually.
Okay.
So it's really just the apartments component of it. The residential component is the legal non-conforming.
Okay. So that restaurant would just maintain the allowable use even if it's vacant for X number of years?
Yeah, I mean, if they reopen, they're gonna have to, they'll bring it up to code or, meet the standards required at the time that they reopen for building code.
Okay. I had a couple questions, Mr. Chair. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but there are some things in the staff review that I think need to be addressed. Page 5, H1, page 1.
Supervisor Craig, if I could interrupt real quick. So I think what you're referring to are the conditional use items. We are, at this point, I think the only item we're talking about is the rezone of those 2 residential lots. So I think that's the next agenda item, would be the conditional use.
Okay. I was under tavern special events H. Am I getting ahead of us?
I think so, because we're just
Okay.
on the rezone from
That's
A2
fine.
to R1 for those 2
Okay.
lots.
Anything? Merle? So, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend the town board to approve the rezoning.
Plan commission to the town board.
Right. To approve rezoning from A2 to R1 residential district for Ralph Willard, included with the conditions Sean mentioned.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Merle. All those in favor, Plan Commissioners only? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, item B. Town of Vernon recommendation to Waukesha County to consider the request for RZ 35 for John Stiegler, Yankee and Yankee Associates, to amend the district zoning map, Waukesha County shoreline and floodplain protection ordinance from A2 rural resident district to R1 residential district in order to accommodate 2 1-acre single-family residential lots on a portion of the property owned by Heaven City Development Corporation / Mr. Ralph Hibbert for the property is described on the agenda. Item B, commissioners or supervisors.
Go ahead. Just a fast question for Amy. If this passes, what's the time frame for approval for the zoning change to take place? Is it a long period or is it going to be a fairly short period of time?
Well, we are gonna wait for the town's land use plan to go through the process or be concurrent. So what do we have now? It's April. It will probably go to the county board in June, at the latest July.
Okay. Is it envisioned of any problems in regard to us changing the zoning from A2 to R1 at the county level?
No, we recommended that they actually go through this
All right,
process.
that's all I was curious about.
Mhm.
Yep.
I'm not as familiar as some of the other members with lot sizes. My concern was hearing Amy talk about the potential for 2-family homes on the lots. Can you
No.
clarify that? Because we've got people in the audience say they obviously don't want 2-family.
Right. No, so the proposed zoning is R1 residential. These are 1-acre lots for single-family home purposes.
That's how it read on the,
Two single-family home properties. So 2 lots
Separate
for
lots.
single-family home. In fact, the county does not provide a conditional use option for multifamily in R1 zoning, so it's not an option.
Okay.
Now, I mean, that's not to say.
good, that's a good answer, that's all I wanted to hear. Okay, thank you.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve, go along with the plan commission's recommendation to change the zoning on these two lots from from A2 to R1 to accommodate two single-family residential lots on a portion owned by Heaven City Development for the property described on this agenda.
I'll second.
So your recommendation is to the county?
Yes.
Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item C. Plan Commission to consider the request CU 22 for John Stiegler, Yankee and Associates to reduce the acreage that is subject to an existing conditional use permit for multifamily use, legal non-conforming use status, and the temporary sale of fireworks on an annual basis on a portion of the property owned by Heaven City Development Corporation / Mr. Ralph Hibbard. The property is described as part of Lot 2 Certified Survey Map number 9385, volume 85, page 222, located in the part of the northwest one quarter and the southwest one quarter of section 19, town 5, north range 19 east, town of Vernon. More specifically, the property is located at South 91 West, 27850 West National Avenue. Flag Commission. Any comments? Any comments from the Flag Commission?
We're just approving the reduction in lot size, nothing to do with business operation, correct?
Except now the exclusion of fireworks from the permit.
Well, the reason I had to read that is because that's what it says on it.
Yeah, exactly. So this first agenda item is for the county's portion of the conditional use permit. The next item will be for the towns, but the issues are the same.
So is there a motion?
I'll make that motion to approve the request to reduce the acreage to the existing conditional use permit for multifamily use of property owned by Heaven City, Ralph Hilbert. That was described in the that you just read. Are there any conditions we have to put in that, Sean, too? Or?
Yeah, well, not for the county's portion, for the town's
Okay.
portion there will be.
All right.
Do you want to do anything with the sale of fireworks on there, or?
Yeah, with the exclusion of the temporary sale of fireworks being removed.
Okay. Madam Clerk, let the motion show that, please. Is there a second? Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item B, Plan Commission to consider a Town of Vernon legal non-conforming conditional use permit for the reduction in acreage that is subject to an existing conditional use permit for the multifamily use, legal non-conforming status, and for temporary non-conforming or temporary sale of annual basis of fireworks on a portion of the property owned by Heaven City / Mr. Ralph Hibbert. The property is described as, one more time I'll read that, part of Lot 2 Certified Survey Map number 9385, volume 85, page 222, located in part of the northwest one corner and the southwest one quarter of section 19, town 5 north, range 19 east, town of Vernon. More specifically, the property is located at South 91, West 27850 West National Avenue. Board members. Any comments, questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the legal non-conforming conditional use permit for Haven City Development, Ralph Hibbard, of the property that was described. Is there, we need the conditions attached?
Yeah, so there's the staff conditions attached to it, which are just a culmination of all the previous conditional use permits minus the fireworks.
With those conditions.
Exclusion,
minus fireworks.
okay.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. All right. Item E, Town Board and Plan Commission discussed event barn and a determination if the event barn qualifies as an unspecified conditional use per section 300.22B, paren 20 of the Town of Vernon zoning code. John, do you want to explain that?
I would love to explain that. So we had an applicant approach the town who's interested in doing an event barn. And we do not have anything on the books as of now that allows an event barn or an event venue. So as you know, our next step in amending the zoning ordinance was to look at conditional uses, and we always knew that event barn, event venue would be a potential use that we'd consider as we went through that process. We didn't get there yet, so this kind of came before, but we also have a provision in the ordinance that allows the Plan Commission to consider unspecified uses as conditional uses if they're not represented in another district. So they're not a permitted use in another district, they're not a conditional use in another district, so the Plan Commission can determine whether or not it's an acceptable use. And so it basically says, other uses or situations not specifically provided for in this conditional use list and which may be determined to be acceptable under the provisions of this code. Such determination shall be made by the Town Plan Commission to meet the intent of the conditional use provisions as set forth in 300-22. So in section 300-22A4, it basically says the basis of approval of conditional uses is as follows. The determination of whether to approve or deny or conditionally approve conditional uses shall be made by the Plan Commission based on consideration of whether or not the use will violate the spirit or intent of the ordinance, be contrary to the public health, safety, or welfare, be hazardous, harmful, noxious, offensive, or a nuisance by reason of appearance, noise, dust, smoke, odor, or other factors. So in considering an event venue or event barn, you'd be looking at those factors in terms of whether or not it's an appropriate conditional use in the town of Vernon. I did mention to the applicant that we would be going through the process of modifying the code where this use would be a potential candidate for a conditional use, and they instead wanted the Plan Commission to act as soon as possible to determine it as an unspecified use. So that's why we're here today. So in my comments that start on the bottom of the first page of the staff report, there's a few things to consider. One is, again, whether an event barn or event venue is an acceptable use and meets the intent of the conditional use provisions, whether we should be looking at limiting it to an event barn or an event venue. And what I mean by that is an event barn is a reuse of an existing facility. So there's a barn that exists on an agricultural property and somebody wants to reuse it as an event venue. And where event venue basically is that any building could be used or any piece of land could potentially be used for an event. So that's the first thing we need to consider is which of the one are we talking about here. And I can tell you that what was being proposed by the applicant was an event barn. So if we preclude event venue, that wouldn't necessarily rule this out. C, the potential standard conditions or requirements for any event barn or event venue. So if we do allow this as a potential conditional use, we need to establish a set of conditions where you would evaluate these by. So because conditional uses are basically uses by right now, based on Wisconsin Act 67, you'll need to have a set of standards, reasonable standards that will need to be met as you evaluate these going forward. So we need to establish those. And then we'd also need to determine which zoning districts the use would be allowed, whether it would be ag districts, residential districts, or all districts where something like this might be allowed. The Planning Commission should not evaluate the unspecified use in the context of any particular site or any proposal as a public hearing needs to happen as part of that. So we can't look at this in terms of looking at one site, because you can't make any decisions on that until the public is heard and the public hearing happens. And so I've listed on the second page, starting at number 3, some potential considerations for conditions that should be discussed and revised or removed as appropriate. As I mentioned, the first thing is whether it's an event venue or an event barn. And I've set up 2 definitions, one for event venue and one for barn. And so the definition for event venue that I've written based on my experience and some research in other communities is a location, i.e. a premise, lot, building, and or structure that's used by individuals or groups for a rental fee or other form of remuneration to accommodate private functions, including but not limited to meetings, banquets, weddings, gatherings associated with anniversaries, birthday parties, and reunions, or other similar gatherings and celebrations. Such a use may include designated outdoor areas for event venue activities, kitchen facilities for preparation or catering of food, and the serving of alcoholic beverages for on-premise consumption only during scheduled events, and shall not be open to the general public. So that's event venue. And then barn is one or more existing agricultural buildings originally constructed for bona fide agricultural purposes and may be presently part of a functioning farm, or may be remaining buildings following the termination of farming activities that is used by individuals or groups for a rental fee, etc., the same as event venue. So the difference is they're buildings that existed or do exist for agricultural purposes to be repurposed for an event. So that's the first consideration. And then, so some of the other conditions, I just want to go through them, and then we can talk about them in terms of how they may or may not apply in the town. The next one is minimum lot area should be 20 acres. It's generally accepted that the size of the parcel should be big enough so that whatever happens or goes on, the number of guests there wouldn't disrupt the neighboring properties. No building, structure, use, or parking associated with the event shall be located less than 100 feet from any adjacent lot line that permits residential use, or 150 feet from any residence not owned by the applicant. That the subject property must abut directly upon an arterial or collector street, and the event access to the parcel shall be from that same street. Now, I want to note that in our ordinances, a collector street is defined as a street used or intended to be used to carry traffic from minor streets to the major system of arterial streets. So that's a little vague, and that's something I think that we should dissect to determine exactly where this type of a use would be allowed. Events must be served by private on-site waste systems and private well, municipal sewer system, or a combination of both. So meaning some kind of a system has to be there. Can't just be outhouses that would serve an event use. Events are limited to no more than 1 event per day, no more than 3 events per week, and no more than 10 events per calendar month. Again, I'm putting that out there as a reasonable condition that we can talk about that. And as an optional condition to consider, the event operator shall, on the first day of each month, provide the town a comprehensive list of all past and planned events, including the date and number of attendees for each event, so the town can kind of just keep track of what's happened, what's occurred, what's planned to occur, to make sure that the limit of events are being met, the number of attendees is being met, etc. No event shall begin prior to 9 a.m. No event shall continue past 11 p.m., which also applies to set up and take down activities, and including the arrival and departure of attendees. No sound amplification devices used in association with outdoor event areas. Exterior lighting will not exceed 15 feet in height above the ground, and light sources shall not be visible from the lot lines measured 5 feet above the lot line. The minimum number of parking spaces would be equal to 75% of the approved maximum capacity of the building, in addition to any spaces required for employees, catering, and support. All parking areas clearly defined and designed with appropriate surface materials determined by the Plan Commission based on the surrounding aesthetic character and uses, topography and drainage, and potential for dust, meaning we would allow some grass parking or some gravel parking, other things, depending on the situation of the surroundings and what the character would be, the number of attendees and so on. And then the Plan Commissioner may require landscaping and screening for parking in outdoor areas used in conjunction with events to provide buffering for adjacent residential uses. And then another optional modification here, and it really only applies if we go the event barn route, not the event venue route, that says a building to be used for event activities shall undergo no exterior modifications, excluding general maintenance, except upon the Plan Commission finding that such modifications shall not undermine the fundamental character of the building or shall otherwise enhance the character of the building according to local agricultural building architecture. The floor area of an existing building to be used for events may be expanded by no more than 10%. And again, that's optional. If you really wanted to keep the character of these barns, that's the type of condition that you'd add in there. So that's all I have.
All right. Let me read what Attorney Macy put down here. It says, although this is a policy decision, it's important that any action taken be done correctly in order to protect the town. And I think that's the utmost. Okay. There is no requirements in the law that says the town must allow wedding barns at all as conditional uses. So we need to determine that. With the change of the law that made conditional use a right instead of a privilege, if the town is of mind to allow event barns by conditional use, all of the requirements and conditions should be included in the action taken. Okay. It will be much more difficult to add conditions later. The other alternatives require the property owner to petition to amend the code and spell out all of the requirements and conditions in the code. So, Plan Commission. We need a determination whether to approve or deny conditional use, such as conditional use shall be made by the town plan and based on consideration. But is this of a mind, in my mind, what are you going to call it? Is it an event barn or the
That venue.
venue, which is it? And we do not have anything that regulates this as of now. So maybe this should go on hold and we should put some regulations. Those are my thoughts. Because at most you want to protect the property owners around it, number one. But if you have a mind, it's a business, okay. You don't want to take away someone's business opportunity either. But we need to think about it.
Well, I would add, excuse me, that the conditions, whether we do it through the ordinance process or we do it through an unspecified use, there will be conditions tied to it either way. And eventually, when we update the code, if this gets approved as an unspecified use, this would eventually make it into the code as a conditional use as well.
Right. So,
I feel like if you're calling it a venue, that almost sounds more like it's going to be a bar or a restaurant. You know, what's stopping that type of business from going in?
Well, it would not be open to the general public. That's part of the definition.
Okay, so
That's in either definition, whether it's a venue or a barn. So we'd make sure that would not happen. But I think the big crux between event venue and event barn is an event venue. They could construct any building they wanted to for this particular use. They wouldn't have to have a building at all to do it as a venue itself. They just have to have septic and so on. So they could have a shed. Well, a shed to have a bathroom facility, and that would be
Field and tents.
an open field and tents. Yeah.
Yeah, I really don't think I want to see tents per se, but I do see the need for having something like this available after just going through a wedding, there's not a lot of places out there to choose from. This would be a good option.
And so in my conditions, I don't have anything precluding tents necessarily. So that would be handled on a case-by-case basis, unless you specified it now that tents would not be part of something like this.
Well, I'm just wondering too, all of a sudden if you go to an event barn and you got the 300 people, the barn's not big enough for you to put up another tent outside in case it rains.
Potentially, and outdoor areas are large. I mean, that's part of the definition as well, is to use outdoor areas as part of this. So that is a consideration. But I think the first thing is, whether it's a barn or a venue, is it something you want to consider as a conditional use at all?
Commissioners? This is commissioners.
No, I'm in favor of having it, I'm just not quite sure what the best route is to go, with just general venue or specified to a barn. You know, I could see it working in either situation, have either type of facility based on the location and property and what's surrounding it. And there's a lot of what ifs, I guess.
Merle?
By limiting or putting a restriction on the number of acres would definitely help. Wouldn't be in subdivisions.
It really limits where it can
The other
go.
thing is, when you read all this stuff, I was looking at the internet, and there's a lot of these around in Wisconsin. The other thing that comes up is the alcoholic beverage thing, tavern, and all that. I think there's lawsuits going on presently involving that, and I don't know if they've been resolved.
Yeah, it's my understanding as of now that, based on information from the state, that they don't necessarily require a liquor license unless a lawsuit would change that interpretation. I know in the town of Waukesha, we did ask for them to obtain a liquor license as part of their event venue.
Anytime anybody is selling liquor over a bar,
You have to have
bar.
If it's sold, yeah, if it's sold. But if it's a private,
Right, if it's a private party, that's a different story.
Right.
But it cannot come through the owner of the property. It has to come by somebody that's part of the party.
Sure. So it would be a case-by-case basis. If someone came through and wanted a wedding venue or an event venue that would only be for private parties, they stipulated that alcohol would not be sold in the property, then we could potentially forego the liquor license. But as the conditional use permits come forward and someone actually comes forward with one, we would stipulate those conditions depending exactly what they want to do, whether that liquor license is required or not, on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the operation would be. It may be that someone come forward and wouldn't even want the liquor license or wouldn't serve alcohol. Are you moving down the route that we should require it no matter what, as part of the approval or as part of the standard conditions?
I think, like what Tom said before, it's something that we should be looking at. But I think we should set the conditions prior to anybody, attempt to set the conditions prior to anybody requesting it.
Absolutely, and that's what my list of conditions is intended to do. So we could certainly add the liquor license component to it ahead of time. Isn't that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I think with each situation, the conditions would vary, and it's hard to nail down condition to each, what they're trying to do.
That's why I try to be as vague as possible, but still protecting the town in terms of the big issues, right? The lot size, the setbacks, the...
Is vague the way you want to go with this? You know, what I see here is it a venue or is it an event barn? An event barn means you need a barn, a building, period, to start this. A venue is you can throw up a tent and have a party.
Yep.
You have to limit it to barn.
What do you want this to look like in the town of Vernon?
If you limit it, if it's a barn there's less likely that it will happen. We have to have a barn, we just can't put it in an open field.
I seen the petitioner's handout and booklet, and I know there are barns on that property. So, I guess you gotta decide what you want with it.
You know, I suppose if you go to event barn and somebody in the future says, I would like to have a venue, we could always go through the whole process again.
It could always be added as a different use down the road.
Correct. But I think for now, it would probably just be safer if we say event barn, keep it a little
Tighter.
so it's not such a broad scope. Bill?
Well, a couple of thoughts I would have is, number one, a question. We don't allow outbuildings to be constructed without a primary residence. Would this be part of a residential 20-acre parcel? In other words, would there be a homestead on it? Or we allow that to be split off as a separate entity?
Well, we didn't really get to the point of which zoning districts it would be allowed in yet, but in ag districts we do allow separate, we do allow ag buildings to exist on an ag parcel without a home. Residential districts don't allow that, but ag districts do. So that's possible, that could be split off.
So technically, an ag building could be split off to a buyer and used for this purpose.
Could be.
So then we have an issue of responsibility, absentee, let's say an absentee landlord situation, I can see a problem. The other issue I would question is what criteria would it be for access? Gravel road, hard surface road, gravel parking, hard surface parking.
Well, the only access conditions I have on here is that the access would be from the arterial or collector road, and then the surface of the parking would be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, because in some situations it would be better, smaller event venues may be better to leave grass and gravel, whereas bigger operations, if it didn't upset the character of the property and surroundings, maybe asphalt would be more appropriate depending on traffic.
Merle?
What about access on an arterial or collector road? Now, it's a little vague in terms of how it's defined in our ordinances in terms of what a collector road is, but street used or intended to be used to carry traffic from minor streets to the major system of arterial streets. So in my mind, a minor street is typically a subdivision street, or a road that comes off of a main road. The collector road collects traffic from subdivision roads, and they're usually perpendicular north, south, east, or west is a typical collector or arterial road in the town. What are your thoughts on that language in terms of access to arterial or collector? Or does it matter? Does it matter if you have 20 acres? Because traffic could be, if there's up to 300 people, and that's the condition here, and you maybe want to diminish that. Maybe 300 is too many. Maybe you think 150 or 200 is an appropriate number of attendees for one of these things. But that's a considerable amount of traffic coming and going at, within an hour, basically. Getting there and leaving.
You've got all of that traffic coming, like say the event starts at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, everyone's coming
earlier,
between 3 to 4. Right.
And then say it's a wedding or whatever, and it goes till 11 o'clock or whatever we have at night. But in between there, then people are coming and going. Not everybody's invited. Then all of a sudden everybody's invited to the party, and you're going to have a little more. But then there's also, you've got to think about emergency help.
Right.
Things can happen. So there's a lot to
There's a lot to consider here, and I think that language collector or arterial basically keeps it out of the subdivisions, but it might open it up to anywhere else that really isn't a subdivision road. So is that good enough?
Well, I could see if that was off of a subdivision road, that type of traffic. Number one, our roads in subdivisions aren't wide enough for that to begin with. And if people are, walking up and down there, they're going for a walk on a Saturday or a Saturday night or whatever, and then they got a bunch of cars coming in, and then that's just a recipe for disaster as far as I'm concerned.
But if it's not a county road or it's not a state road, it's a town road, those are typically.
Well, I'm talking about subdivision.
Right, but those roads aren't any smaller than other town roads that are under town jurisdiction. Like 22 feet of pavement, whether it's in a subdivision or not, is that's about the standard size.
Well, the other question is too, if we're saying event barn, isn't the size of the barn determines how many people it can accommodate?
Absolutely. So it's going to be.
It may not be anywhere near 300 allowed on the property without.
Unless they had some outdoor areas dedicated to it. But you're right. When this gets approved and the building gets inspected by the building inspector and an occupancy number gets assigned to it, maybe it only holds 150 people, and that would effectively be the limit, assuming everybody would want to come into the barn at some point. So, yeah, and that would be determined as each of these applications would go forward what the limit would be. And there may be a situation where a conditional use comes forward, and even though we have 300 as the limit on the standard conditions, based on the neighborhood and based on the route into the building, into the actual event venue, you could still make the case that a reasonable condition would be to limit it even further based on the surroundings and say, even though this is a collector road, there's lots of residences on this particular road. We think 300 is too much for this particular application, and maybe 150 would be a more appropriate number depending on what the surroundings show. Or maybe we take it off altogether and deal with it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I'm afraid so much as it's going to be a case-by-case basis. It's hard to come up with.
Well, it is hard to come up with. And as I mentioned vague conditions before, and that's probably the wrong word because I did lock down a few things here in terms of finite numbers. But we can't think of everything at the outset because we haven't seen every situation. So what you try to do is you try to come up with a broad set of conditions that handles 90% of the considerations, and then the last 10% is going to have to be dealt with as you see the specific application. Get feedback from the public as part of the public hearing, and then fine-tune it based on reasonable standards.
Well, I think that's what this should start with a public hearing.
Sure.
Because let the public, I think, get the feedback on whether they want an event barn or a event venue. Either or. I myself would go for an event barn because it's someplace, it's static, it's there.
Are you saying that as we do the next round of updates on the zoning ordinance for conditional uses and hold those public hearings, is that what you're suggesting?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a logical approach.
Maybe they don't want it at all. Anywhere in the town. I don't know. Never talked about it.
Right. Hasn't been discussed.
Never been discussed. Not that I know of the last time. Gentlemen, what do you think?
I'm definitely in favor of having something like this. It's just a matter of.
Yeah. I think it would fit. I think it would fit down there if it's got the right conditions. I think that's a good place for it down there. On the south side of town down there. Gary?
Well, I don't have a problem with it. I think the minimum 20-acre lots will determine a lot of whether there's any kind of like thing in the town that will come into being. One question I had in regard to this was the private on-site waste system. What is that? Does that mean a septic system, or could they have like porta potties?
That means it's a septic system would be
They
required.
have to have a septic system?
Yeah, let me read it again, just to make sure I understand.
Huh? Yeah, so that,
Events must be served by a private on-site waste system and a private on-site well, or a municipal system if it existed. So yes, you could not serve it just by outhouses.
yeah, they'd have to have its own septic system
Correct.
and own well, its own well. That kind of limited it to a barn rather than an event venue.
Unless they constructed a building just for that purpose.
Yeah.
I don't know too many barns that have facilities in them.
Yeah.
Porta potties, that's how everybody goes.
Yeah.
Size restrictions. I don't know too many barns that are actually set up initially with a maximum allowable number of people in it. That'd be something we'd have to have our inspector go out and identify each one. How about the fire department for safety?
Yeah, both would be involved.
You know, they want, like Tom mentioned, emergencies, you want to make sure you have access to the facility in an emergency, things such as that.
Correct.
Like you said, it's going to be almost impossible to tie everything together. I'd like to know what the petitioner's intent is as far as venues in the barn, frequency, types of things that would be done. And if they're thinking about having an event to sell fireworks, that's obviously out of question. I'd like to see what the ideas are behind that before we make a judgment on it.
Right.
Just a barn event is pretty open.
But again, we can't evaluate this on any specific use at this time because there hasn't been a public hearing. And we'd be making decisions if you approve this tonight as an unspecified use, or in the future after a public hearing approved it, you still don't have everyone in mind. So no matter what, you'll never know all of the factors in terms of what people are proposing to use it for. Because there's going to be different petitions that will come forward.
Like you said, we're going to have to potentially change this as we go anyway. Even though Macy says if there's a law, you might get locked in. Well, if there's a law, there's a law, you know. That can happen to anything.
Well, one thing the law does say, and I think he's aware as well, is that even though whatever it is you establish in your code eventually for conditional uses, you can also add reasonable conditions as part of the process. So you're not only locked to whatever it is that you decide upon.
Right, it works both ways. They can come in and object to it too.
Right,
And say it wasn't reasonable. And
they can. So if you can prove there's substantial evidence that this condition is reasonable, and here's why, we're requiring this setback, and here's why, and it's a reasonable condition.
Well, that can make some people scared to do anything with this stuff. But I think what we'd like to do, if I were making a decision, I'd sure like to know what the initial use for that is, to see if it's even something we want to get into at this point in time, or wait till it happens and have them come forward.
But it can never be considered until it's allowed in the books. So right now it isn't allowed in the books as an unspecified use or as a conditional use, so they can never come forward until the ordinances say they can come forward.
So we either have to have a full basket, or just put a title on it and leave it like that until somebody comes in and asks for details.
Right.
Well, if we say it's a event barn, it only allowed on agricultural property, at least 20 acres, I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, we agree there.
And then as they come, as an option to add to our zoning code, and then as they come forward with the
extended
plans, then we can start.
Are you saying none of these other conditions would apply?
Well, I'm afraid they're going to be
too restrictive.
Well, kind of wait and see what comes forward, what they want. Time frames done by 11 o'clock on a weekend night, that could be kind of short. If you're at a wedding, like these maybe go to midnight. During the week, I can see having shorter hours. I can see all this stuff would be
adjustable.
adjustable
Yeah,
somehow.
I agree, and I think the 11 is conservative, and I put it as 11 as a talk. I mean, because I've seen midnight is a pretty standard ending time for event venues and event barns. But other things are pretty basic, like the lighting heights, the minimum parking spaces, the materials, the consideration.
You want to throw out your framework, Sean? I think that would be there, but there's some other suggestions being made, and maybe we'd add that if we're going to work with that framework.
What was the
Embellish it
addition?
a little bit.
No, I'm just saying, kind of a case-by-case scenario, a lot gonna vary. I think
But even case by case, Jeff, you brought up some things that I think we'd want standard in it. I mean, if you're living next to the barn, 300 feet away, and they got a loud band of music playing, you don't want that 11 o'clock at night on a work night. So
Right.
there's some situations that we want to embellish a little on that. But I think the framework's there. It's a matter of adding whatever concepts you can put into it that you can see coming down in the future. It's a look in the future. Best guess. Pull out the dartboard and throw the dart.
It is.
Now it's just a matter, do you want something or don't you? I think we want something.
Did the town of Mugwanago and the town of Waukesha both turn this down?
I don't know the town of Mugwanago, but Waukesha established the same way as you're doing tonight a couple of years ago was an unspecified use, and they went with event venue, not event barn. I wasn't planning for them at the time. Some of these conditions are the same as theirs, and some of them are not.
A venue kind of goes to personal property because we don't have a lot of established businesses in the area that would have an event where the building would be sufficient size to do something like the barn.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and when I had my wedding for the girls, it's at the backyard. We didn't know if it was going to rain or shine that day, and I didn't want people sitting out in the back with no protection because there were more people who would fit in the house. So we also had some porta potties out there because I didn't want myself to get blown away by the number of people out there also. So those are the things that I'd be a little objectionable to if somebody started putting those kind of restrictions on in a town. You want to put that in the city? I got no problem. I live in a town. I'd like to keep that out.
Are you saying that you don't want the condition in there about requiring septic?
Well, separating the barn from the event. It meant barn versus the event itself. The barn is, I think you need porta potties at the barn as well, because I don't think the septic's on those areas would be sufficient. Normally the houses for farmers aren't that big. You wouldn't want to have 300 people in a barn using their toilets. You know?
Well, oftentimes you could add, so when the one we recently approved in Waukesha, that was an existing barn, was being retrofitted, and a really nice job. A whole new septic system had to be designed and put in for it, because it's a big deal. I mean, there's a lot of people out there. 300 people events, they needed something more than a couple of porta potties and the existing
So you're
septic
thinking
system.
more an event barn is a full-time business that's going to be able to support
It
the
might-
cost of something like a full septic system?
It might end up being in certain circumstances.
Well, what if it's not full blow? What if it's people want to have want to have a wedding in the barn?
Just a party. That isn't a business and isn't a recurring thing.
Well, are we calling an event barn a business then? So that should be the first part of the definition?
Well, it essentially is a form of a business. You're charging money for use of your property.
So are we going to require them to have a business license of some sort then?
I don't know.
I almost think if you're going to be selling the alcohol, then you need to have the bathroom septic system well watered. If you're just renting your space, say you're just renting your barn out for a small gathering, then I can see you getting by with porta potties. And you're not selling the alcohol, they're bringing their own in. It's just you're providing the space. I can see there being a difference there. Because like if you're selling the alcohol, then you're really making it into more of a business.
You're too young to understand that. Depends on how old the people are.
I got a question.
I'm just throwing a little humor in there.
We got 2 golf courses in town.
Yeah.
We do something like this and go to barn instead of venue. What happens if they want to have some type of a tournament, and is that going to now hinder those businesses?
Because you guys have events out there, at the golf course. would this change your, would you
Yeah,
have to give
pavilion.
it additional use?
He's got a good sized pavilion.
Not big enough.
I'm sure that.
I mean, your conditional use allows you to have an event if,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Similar to the one we heard previously tonight for Ralph Rivers' property, his conditional use also specifies events as part of that. So the tavern-related events, he's got a site plan that shows where things can go. So that was part of the conditional use in general as part of the tavern. So it's an extension of the tavern use for outdoor use of the events. Same as yours for the golf course, extension of the golf course use. For
I'm
events.
just bringing that up, that should be maybe thought about and at least looked at. So it doesn't, whatever we do here doesn't hurt the businesses that already have the conditional uses.
What I'm hearing from part of that, I think, is do we have enough ordinances in place right now not to have to worry about this?
I'm not following.
Well, we get into the alcohol for one thing. We have ordinances relative to alcohol.
State statutes.
Use. We get to loud noise and obstruction of people's properties when we're trying to arrest, things like that. We have those kind of ordinances in place. So are we not covered sufficiently with ordinances, or we need to add something, another layer to it to allow for these two? Is there something major missing that we need to cover these two events as far as the
What
ordinances?
about, police protection?
I'm sorry?
Police protection. I mean, I've been to weddings already, especially in a couple of the groups that there have been full-blown fistfights, you know, and where you need the sheriff's department or the constable or whatever.
Sure.
You know?
That happens in taverns.
Well,
It doesn't, and I can tell you to that point, in the town of Waukesha, one of the conditions that ended up being in, not the standard conditions, but the one that got approved for the permit, was that a security officer be designated as part of the night. So one of the staff was designated as security for that night, that would be in charge of that as the point person. So that, not saying that's a consideration for you necessarily, but that was something
That
that
was
we
a
talked
simple
about.
ordinance, so it was a cover-all for any party.
well, I'm just saying that should be in there, in the use that some type of security be available or mandatory.
So it'd be one security person.
You might want that for any.
Like that.
You could want that for all sorts of occasions.
Yeah.
Well, I would say if it's, you know,
Getting in-laws
X amount of
together.
people.
If it's a bird wedding, you need security.
Well, it's a start, let's put it that
I'm
way.
wondering-
That's what I think Sean's looking at, is that something that's preliminary to start, kick this off and proceed from there.
That's fine if that's the direction you want to go, but your options are either
Event barn?
determine tonight if it's an unspecified use, whether it's a barn or not, or wait for zoning changes to occur as part of a public hearing process.
I'd like to take it one step at a time. We have a request, a petition here for an event barn. Okay, let's start there. Leave the open event for the citizens.
Not to make this more complicated, what if you had like an event barn for smaller functions where you get by with just porta potties and you go to them? Event venue, that where it's larger, then you require the septic, water.
Combine it.
Yeah, we get two different categories.
Or you could simply say for smaller events, so under a certain number of people, you could say it's not required, and then above would be required, whether it's a barn or not.
Because even on an event venue, if you have 300 people in a house, you're overworking the septic tank, but if you're gonna force that to be a new septic on the barn, that's be the same application. You gotta treat everybody equal, so you'd have to tell the homeowner, well, to have that many people in your yard for a wedding or a party, you gotta put in a new septic tank. That ain't gonna fly.
Right.
So we've gotta make some separations there that follow some logic that I'm not sure how to nail down right now. There's some hard questions there.
Well, if you're gonna have a party at your house or a wedding or something, you don't need a town.
Are you gonna call that event venue?
No.
Sound might.
If you did it every week, you might call it that, but if it's once a year for your kid's wedding.
Or anniversary or
Nobody's-
something, you know.
yeah.
I have one in my house.
You know, I wouldn't see it being under town jurisdiction at
300
that
people
point.
at my house.
Geez, I wonder about that woman who ran that rummage every weekend.
Yeah.
Well, that's when it gets to be
A venue.
multiple times a year.
Yeah, if you want a barn and have one party a year, basically, nobody's gonna know or care.
I guess that segregation applies, that works.
But I think maybe we distinguish between the size of the two, because I don't know that many barns that can probably hold more than 100 people.
Oh,
Yeah, and 300 maybe.
see my son.
300 maybe too large.
Yeah, take 20 acres and park cars for
Big
150
barn.
people.
So, just beside the conditions, which way are we leaning to make it unspecified use determination, or fold it into the zoning update and have the public hearing as part of the discussion?
Commissioners?
I think we need to have it part of the public hearing discussion. And since they came forward wanting the event barn, I think we should go that route for now, unless somebody else in the future comes forward for a venue. We just gotta forget that idea for now. I do like a lot of your basic stuff here, but I think we can probably tweak it up a little bit. I do like the idea, the not allowing the outside music amplified. That's gonna prevent the country thunder from happening in some farmer's field, you know?
So we don't have a timeline on the next round of zoning updates. We've been busy with other things in the comp plan amendment and the last round of zoning. So, you know, that's something we can look at in the next couple of months, but it's gonna be 3, 4, 5, 6 months before that process is completely done and worked through. Is that acceptable to everybody?
You know what the time frame for the people asking for the venue is?
I do not know. I know they're here tonight, so.
You guys want to relax the rules? Let them
Then
come.
we can speak.
Yeah, it might be helpful.
Is there a spokesperson from the group?
Yeah.
Just state your name, please.
Yep. Michael Alex, did you need an address too? Currently 11222 West Janesville Road, Dales Corners. And my wife Joy is with me. And we were the petitioners that kind of set this in motion. I know when I met with Sean, he said, you know, this is coming down the pike, and I didn't want to, you know, fast track anything, but also just understanding the time frame of, you know, we're moving into the property at the end of this month, actually. And then this type of plan requires a full year just to be able to get reservations for that following year. So that is kind of, between that and the fact that winter isn't even done yet, knowing when construction can happen on this type of stuff is the other consideration. I don't know, I kind of had an outline of what you guys were going to be discussing from the staff notes. And we went through this process actually down in Racine. We had a property lined up. They have an event barn ordinance for the county. They do it a little bit differently, where you go before the county and then you go before the individual municipalities or towns, depending on what it is. And we got approved at the county level, but then the property owner wanted to keep it in the family and kind of backed out. So I'm glad that happened, because we found this property. And not to get into ours specifically, but to give you a couple ideas in talking about the event barn that you're talking about versus a venue. In Racine, they have a date, so they say anything prior to 1960 or 62, I believe, can only be considered, so that it's not, we have the land, we're just going to build new construction and create a banquet hall. It has to be something that's repurposed. So that kind of is one thing in how Sean kind of laid it out, either had a previous or current agricultural use. Other municipalities do something like adding a date to that. There are some other considerations that Sean mentioned, whether it be the limiting to not be open to the public. That was something that came up there as well, and that's something that should be a consideration for these types of properties. As far as limiting when you can have it, I know some comments were brought up about during the week versus weekend. You know, there are different, you know, parameters for all of those. And whether that's handled in your initial code language or at the next level when it's, you know, property specific, definitely should be something to consider in restricting those, just so it's not 24/7, 365. You can be turning people in and out. That's not our intention for this property, but, you know, again, another consideration as far as limiting. I think this outline kind of lays out maximum number of events is one way to do that. My question would be, what do you define as an event? Do you define an event, for instance, if we're looking at the wedding scenario, you have, the wedding is on a Saturday, they have a rehearsal on Friday. Is that 2 events? Is that 1 event? You know, it's the same party, but, you know, and it's something that in practice doesn't, you would probably be able to logically think of it one way or the other, but just something to consider as far as what you define as an event. And I think the other thing, not going and breaching that difference between, you know, something that is rented out to private parties versus just open to the public. I think fireworks sales were kind of brought up. It's not something where there's going to be a sign at the end of the road that says, hey, come on in, we're having a party today, and just anybody can come in. Some of the oversight with the town probably is that's the goal, to accomplish that side of it. Other than that, you know, there's some individual types of considerations that I had. The one thing called into question, I don't know if it was really brought up too much today, would just be the parking requirement. You know, 75% of the approved maximum capacity. Having already applied, I kind of used the existing requirements for, and I think the town has for banquet halls, I think it's 1-to-3 ratio, so 33% ratio, something like that. That would just be it. Other than that, the one comment about amplified music, because we want to be a good neighbor, so I think the question was, you know, can this be something where it's split off from another property? I think that's another good consideration to consider. Again, not getting into our, you know, specific site, but that is something worth incorporating into the ordinance language, or however that would happen, would make a lot of sense. One more point that I was going to... any other...
What were we planning for septic?
Full septic.
Full septic.
Yeah, separatism. So, and again, that's another thing that the city of Racine, they say, it obviously has to meet, that's a county-wide decision to make, but their language says if the existing on-site system is able to handle it, you can tie into the existing system, or you have to have it separate. And that is a big consideration. I think the comment was, you know, if you have a couple of events for your family, that might be handled by something where you go into the town and you have an application where you say, we're going to, you know, host a party here, just so that you're not trying to, you know, skirt the system. That probably isn't, there's no payment. Even if it's, you know, my nephew or something, that type of thing is different than what we're proposing. I think different than what, you know, Sean's write-up kind of is geared towards. That would probably be more so on a, you know, a permit type of basis.
And then are you planning on selling the alcohol or just renting out the space?
From what I've looked, we would be selling the alcohol because it's something where you can't cater it. So even if a catering company were to purchase it, there's carry-in beverage laws where you're not allowed to, as the caterer, bring it and then serve it. But if you are the, you know, bride and groom, you can go to the caterer and they can have a retail license. They can buy the alcohol from you, or from, you know, the caterer. They can bring it to the site, and then the caterer can serve it to you. But if the caterer is the one that holds it and stores it and refrigerates it and brings it, then they become, you know, they have to be the license holder, not just for retail. So we would propose that we would get a Class B liquor license in our case. One thing in talking, you know, about how Sean mentioned, and maybe being in Wisconsin, we kind of laugh at it, but thinking of a dry wedding might be foreign to us. But that would be something where, if you don't want to get too nitpicky and say, well, if someone wants to have a dry wedding venue, that'd be great, that's fine. but you're going to put that limitation on them to say you're not allowed to have carry-in. And that's the big thing that you get carry-in. People say, well, we're just going to bring our own stuff. But if you put that condition, I think having a liquor component to it as the operator would make a lot of sense because of the oversight it allows.
That's where you're going to make your money, sell alcohol.
Possibly.
Alcohol brings up the question of what Tom had mentioned with police coverage. You know, you start serving alcohol and potential's there. So
Correct.
my question would be, they thought about that.
Yeah, and typically the way that we've seen these run is you're renting the space in a lot of cases, so you'll have a lot of outside vendors. So you'll have a caterer, and some places do use outside vendors for alcohol sales. That's another option to go. But as the venue, specifically, you have 2 to 3 people that are assigned to facilitate the event taking place. They're overseers. They're answering questions. The idea of having a designated security, personnel that makes sense. Obviously, you'd have to have a good relationship with the town and emergency services. That would make a lot of sense, in writing it into something like this would make sense. And
I would just caution everybody not to get too far into specifics about the proposal itself, because this isn't the public hearing for that specific use. So we should be talking in generalities as it applies to all potential event barns in town.
And I think the other thing that just first is the last item O, because it kind of spans 2 topics, is that modifications to the barn. So in order to be operating, you're operating, in talking with the Vince Bouillat, the inspector, you have to come up to commercial building code. So, your loads and everything on your floors, you have to be up to commercial standard. Just like with egress, you have to have fire exits, you have to have those accommodations. So, making alterations to the barn is required, from a building and safety standpoint, that we would obviously definitely do. But I just don't know, another good example is ADA compliance. If you have, a bank barn, or depending on the barn where you're at, you might not be able to get to the main floor without having something like an exterior ramp. Those types of things are modifications to the outside of the structure that might fall outside of, it would be something that as the board or commission you would probably approve, but it's just something to consider that those types of accommodations would have to be made just from a building use standpoint on the inspection and fire department side.
Have you ever had an opportunity to run one of these before?
No.
So this is your conception of what this was going to entail?
Yes, and in doing research over the last 2 or so years, we have family members in the hospitality and restaurant business that are partnering with us on it, but this is our venture. As far as getting back into our specifics, I don't know how much we get into that. And the liquor licensing process is another way, as like kind of that vetting side of it as the operator.
So, gentlemen, you've heard enough to determine whether this is an event barn or if it qualifies for unspecified conditional use. Is that the route you want to go?
I like adding a date in there for a barn. So you're not just using a metal pole barn conversion. I can have an actual wood structure type building under the event barn menu.
If you were to pick a date, though, it would have to be based on something. We'd have to maybe do a little research. Because the whole point of the conditions they're reasonable, they're based on evidence. That just picking 1960, for instance, doesn't mean anything in the context of the town of Vernon. So we'd have to figure out maybe the last barn was built that we would consider this for, or maybe a couple of them to kind of determine when the cutoff date would be. So that would take a little bit of research, I think, but we could do that.
Gentlemen, what do you want to do?
I was just saying, can we just,
Or we could say existing as of today, you know, that would be one way to do it. So that nothing new would be built just to create an event barn.
or can you say the style of building restricted to?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to have that condition there at all. I mean, you could let somebody build a barn but it's, the definition that I've used for event barn talks about an ag building built for bona fide agricultural purposes. So if you go with that definition, someone just throwing up a barn and not actually have it ever been used for ag purposes would be disqualifying for the conditional use. So that kind of covers it in the sense that it was built for that purpose, for ag purposes, used for ag purposes, and now it's being used for an event barn.
Yeah, I guess I'm good enough with that. Doesn't benefit anything.
But it sounds like the public hearing was a big consideration before any decisions are made. Is that still the direction you're going, or not?
Man, I'd want to know.
Obviously, the public hearing is required for the specific petition. Once an event venue or event barn is allowed, there'll be a public hearing. But are you saying the public hearing should be used to actually establish these standard conditions as well? Because if that's the case, then it does require the zoning code to be updated. The public hearing
This is
process.
something new for the town, and people are going to wonder how it's going to affect them, you know.
You know, if we do have the public hearing first, they're going to be asking these questions, and then we're not going to have any answers to them. Or if we wait for the public hearing, once they have presented a plan, then we can get more feedback and have answers for them.
The only positive to doing the public hearing as part of the rezoning before you do this is just to get the general sentiment as well as to whether or not
If it's
is this use that the town is interested in terms of knowing that, hey, there's a 20-acre property next to me that could eventually be used as an event barn. You get some general feedback from a general consensus. So that's one option.
So for the public hearing, we just have a broad scope on that right now.
We would have, you know, we would amend the zoning ordinance, because when we're going to look at all the conditional uses, we're going to be going through and looking at conditions for all of them. Maybe taking some out, maybe adding some in. Event barn could be one we add in. These conditions could be added in along with some things we talked about tonight to tweak them. We say, here's the proposed zoning ordinance. What do you think? As part of a public hearing. Maybe we tweak them some more, gets updated, and then finally it's in the code. Then they would submit their application for an event barn based on what was decided as part of the public
then you
hearing.
get into specifics.
I'm not saying that's the only way it can happen, because we do have the provision for unspecified conditional use, and the Plan Commission can make that determination at any time without a public hearing. But I guess I'm just mirroring what you're saying in terms of the public hearing is maybe not a bad idea.
Maybe at least 3 months out before a public hearing.
Has the town of Vernon ever used, I know the code's only been in place since 2016. Has any use been established as part of this unspecified conditional use provision? I don't recall when Jamie was here if there's anything or not.
No.
So this would be the first to use that mechanism.
Yeah, this would be the first.
Mm-hmm. And so I'd also add, since we know we are amending the ordinance, it's not like we weren't even considering amending the ordinance to look at conditional uses. That's been the intent this year all along. So we just hadn't quite gotten there yet. And when I met with the applicant, we discussed that process, and they decided, well, let's see what happens to this route anyways, even knowing that you're considering that. But knowing that we are going to amend the ordinance, or that's planned for this year, then it doesn't seem that big of a deal to push it off and just include it, lump it together with that, to bring it all in the open, to make it all heard by the public. I know in terms of timelines, that might not be best for the petition at hand, but again, we're not considering a specific petition at this time. We're not acting on behalf of any specific petition for an event barn.
No, I think I'd like to make a comment. This board has been pro-business from day one. I'd like to see new business in town anytime there's an opportunity. So as far as putting something together now, get an outline so we could hold a public hearing and explain to them what our thoughts are on this, and then embellish it as we need to from the public hearing or whatever. I'm fine with getting that cut, but that's not my decision as a board member. I would like to encourage the planning commission to adopt something tonight so we have an outline or a structure to work with and go from there. That's my only comment.
If they're under a time crunch, we're doing this public hearing, can they also at the same time come forward with their plans and we do an unspecific condition for them if that's going to be, if all of a sudden we have the public hearing and we have this available, can we do it at the same time, or is it?
Well, if you establish the unspecified use tonight or next month or whenever it is you do it, they could come forward with their conditional use petition anytime after the planning commission decides, yes, this is an okay unspecified use, and here are the conditions, and here are the districts in which it applies. So they could come forward anytime. They can't come forward with an application, though, until it's on the books for them to do so, as part of the zoning ordinance update. It's got to exist as a use before they can submit an application.
Okay, so if we wait for the public hearing, it's at least 3 months out, then they can come forward. It'll probably be approved a month later than 4 months.
Yeah, but remember that the county also has to approve any change to the zoning ordinance, and that's a couple-month process.
So probably at 7 months then.
Well, I don't know specifically, but if, let's say we think 3 months for the, two to 3 months to update to get it through the town portion, and then then it goes to the county. That could be, it could be 5 months, 6 months, depending. We can't guarantee any specific timeline, but I think at the minimum it would be 5 months, maybe as long as 7 months.
Always seems to take longer than you think. What kind of time crunch are you guys on?
Well, understanding that there's people that are scheduling for their weddings for next year are doing it actually March and April are the times that they're doing it. So we're already behind schedule. If you look at some metrics, if not, our plan was to be able to be up and running on an abbreviated schedule for next spring. So in order to do that, a 7-month kind of window would make next year near impossible.
Have you purchased the land yet?
We close at the end of the month. The only way for us to get the property was to not wait for this process to go back and forth, and we.
Is it appropriate to ask for that?
I don't know. We shouldn't discuss the specifics of the actual location. Right. So I guess the other thing I'd add is, even if you don't approve it tonight as an unspecified use and decide not to do this part of the zoning, we could certainly bring it back next month, maybe tune the conditions up a little bit, and if you wanted to notice it in a way and maybe publicize that we'll be talking about this unspecified use. It's not a public hearing necessarily, but we could bring it back and maybe get some public comment on it that way as an alternative.
Yeah, I think I'd be in favor of try to speed things up for them.
Are they looking next month?
Well, it'll be up to us. Do we want to bring it back next month to continue the discussion as an unspecified use with maybe some tuned up conditions, What could we do to broaden the public input on this?
And the only reason I need to know is, for the legal notice.
Right, so what would you, I mean, what could we wouldn't have a buffer from any specific property, so the only ways to notice it are public hearing, which is not a public hearing, or what are other options to get more public input? What do you suggest?
Oh, God, I know what I'd suggest, but I don't know if we have it in the budget.
Yeah, if you individually mailed everybody for
Right.
this, that's one way to get it, but that's certainly an extreme in terms of getting input. So
website?
we could put it on the website.
Yeah, but
That's not going to necessarily get a ton of feedback unless you specifically look at the website.
Well, what do you guys want to do with this? Do you want to have it an unspecified conditional use?
Yeah.
Is that the consensus?
I think for a matter of helping them out, yes, we
Okay.
have to go that route.
Do you want to put a label on it? Do you want to put an event barn or venue?
Bar.
Do we have to put a label on it?
Well,
Is it so specific?
well, that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Do you want to put a label on it?
The other thing that just occurred was if we did the rezone application itself, if we didn't look at every single conditional use now, and we just focused on event barn, and the petitioner submitted the application for the zoning amendment, just specifically to event barns, we could get through the process much faster because we're only considering barns. We have the public hearing as part of it. The county would move faster. We could probably get done, through that like a 3-month process if we went down that route.
And we can put that in the unspecified conditional use, right?
No, just as the event barn.
Just the event barn. But what about the unspecified conditional?
We wouldn't use that anymore. We'd use the event barn. We'd modify the code. We'd propose language. We could work together to propose language. We'd have the public hearing on it and go that route.
what would you rezone it to?
Speed up the process.
We wouldn't rezone it to anything. We would establish the districts in which it would be allowed.
Oh, okay.
So we talked about ag districts. We would limit it to agricultural districts is what I heard. We'd work up the language together because the public hearing would allow that and to be heard in that sense, and then we could get through it. It's sort of the best of both worlds. It's not a 1-month process, but it's not a 6 or 7 month process either, and it gets the public hearing as part of it.
Doesn't Ozaki, aren't there 2 counties that have some pretty specific language in regards to event barns?
Almost everybody has specific language to event barns nowadays because they're so popular. I mean, they're popping up everywhere for the most part. So people are either they have it in the books or they're scrambling to get it out of the books. That's part of the reason we were talking about it. So yes, there's countless things to draw from. And when I put these conditions together, I looked at a number of different things. These conditions are written 50 different ways in 50 different ordinances, but
Because I went one in Mequon, and it was really top notch.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's going to depend on the specific application in terms of what the extent, how far an event venue is going to be remodeled, and we may put some limits on that. But I don't know. What's your thought on doing an abbreviated process with just looking at event barn as a change to the code, with a petition by the applicant to change to amend the text?
Build the skeleton, put the body in. I like it.
I'm good with that.
Is there a motion? As a plan commissioner first?
Yeah,
Recommendation.
I'm just trying to think of how we word this motion. I'll make it to,
Authorize the planner.
Well, or to encourage the petitioner to submit a petition to amend the zoning ordinance to include an event barn, working with the planner to establish conditions.
sounds good. I'll make that motion.
You want to see that?
Merle's gonna second that? And that's a motion to the town board. Any more discussion?
Was there a second? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Merle. Commissioners, any more discussion? Bill? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. So, town board.
I'll make that same motion.
To concur with the Plan Commission?
Correct.
No, second.
Any more discussion?
Plan Commission and Town Board.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain. Karen?
I had noted for the record, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Please, they're not violating.
Item F, Dave Sparks conceptual certified survey request for the properties located at South 25, 250, South 257, South 6755 Fox Court.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to state that Mr. Sparks had a family emergency, but I think Planner Sean Malarkey can explain it very easily to you. If that's all right with you, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman?
Go ahead, Sean.
Okay, so the petitioner is requesting conceptual approval for a certified survey map to combine two lots within the Millbrook Village subdivision. The subdivision was established in 1978. These are lots 9 and 10. Lot 9 is currently vacant. Lot 10 includes the petitioner's residence. The combined lot would be about 3.21 acres in area. The existing lots are 1.69 and 1.52 acres. The existing zoning is R1A. Essentially, there's no reason that these lots could not be combined. They'd be larger. The lot would be larger than directly surrounding lots, but there are larger lots in that subdivision, 3-4 plus acres in that particular subdivision. What this would allow the petitioner to do would be to put, I don't know if this is his intention or not, but he'd be allowed to put an accessory building on that lot where he could not now, even though he owns it, because it could not be built without the principal a house being on there to begin with. So this would allow them to do that. The only thing I'd point out, in our subdivision ordinance, lots generally should be about a 2-to-1 depth. This lot will be wider than it is deep. That's not a hard and fast rule in terms of lot configuration, but just something to consider as part of this. And since this is conceptual only, the Plan Commission should just provide the applicant direction in terms of their thoughts on this specific combination. They'd come back at a later date with the actual CSM, provide your direction.
Having a 3-acre lot, how big a building, accessory building can you build then?
That's a good question. It's
1.5% of the FRA.
Yeah.
So I think it's 3,000. So 1,200 on a residential 1-acre lot.
Right.
And I don't think he's got enough. Well, I'll stick that first.
Yeah, I have no idea what the intentions are for accessory buildings, but it would open it up to a large accessory building on that parcel.
I don't think he's looking for anything substantial. He just can't fit a building the way his current lot is structured in the trees and how the lot is laid out, the topography. So that's why he's looking for. I don't think he's looking for anything big. But he just can't do it on his existing parcel.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with combining the two lots at this point.
So they're going to have one tax key?
Yes. If he has one certified survey map, will combine, yes.
Once the CSM creates the one lot, there'll be one tax key.
Not fall into that void that we've had trouble with.
If he doesn't combine, he may well fall into that void.
But that's going to have to be specified in the use or whatever.
It would negate him from the new legislation that a lot be taxed.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
But that would prohibit him from that.
Yeah.
They don't need a motion, do they?
No formal motion, it's just discussion and direction to the petitioner.
Did you want me to contact Mr. Sparks? Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Tell him to proceed.
Anybody, commissioners? Merle, Bill, Jeff?
I have no problem with combining the two lots.
Bill?
I have no problem either. In fact, I think looking at what they're doing is probably the smartest thing they can do, because if they don't have deed restrictions in there, they can have some animals, plus ultimately, I think if they're doing the right thing, they're gonna get, according to the new statutes, they're gonna get fully assessed for a buildable lot on that extra lot anyway, if it isn't already. So, I would, yeah, I have no problem with that.
Alrighty then.
Okay, you're gonna contact them?
I will.
Hobby Kennel. Applicants for Josh and Victoria Anderson, West 253 South 7585 Forest View. There's two of them, correct?
Yes.
So we'll take number one first. Are the people here for those?
The
Would you
Andersons?
like to come up front, please?
Does Mr. Anderson look familiar?
Ms. Anderson, I am part of the Fox River Band.
I was going to say.
Sean, you wanna?
I do not have a staff report.
You don't have anything? Okay. So, number of dogs you wanna do is 3 dogs, correct?
Correct.
And are any of these, do you know Mike and Sheila Diallo or whatever? No? Okay. This is the one for Forest View, okay. I'm gonna read this in under Clerk Chu. We would like to voice some concerns regarding the above hobby kennel at West 253, South 7585, correct? Yes. If the dogs would always be housed indoors and the windows closed, barking should not be a problem. However, if they will be allowed to run in the yard, it could be annoying and noisy. We have already had dogs in our neighborhood that were very loud and barking at all hours of the day and night. We don't want that. With what is keeping the owners from getting a 4th or 5th dog, it seems to me the 2 dogs should be sufficient. We also have concerns with the laws regarding hobby kennel have too little or no penalties for breaking them, because we do not want to make enemies of our neighbors. We would not actively oppose the getting hobby kennel license. Okay, so that was a comment at the end. Okay, so, commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, I should probably just state that they're proposing only 3 dogs, and in their submittal, it indicates what the 3 dogs are, and they also indicate they have an underground electric fence around the entire premises. They are not proposing any outside kennel per se. The dogs are going to be in their homes. I don't believe they're asking for any type of breeding of these animals.
They're all female and they're all safe.
Yeah, so that's not going to happen. I just wanted to state for the record, what they're asking for. They're asking for permission of their animals for a hobby kennel license. And the conditions of what they're asking for. They're not asking for any more than 3 dogs. And Mrs. Kalawa, also a neighbor of yours, called, and when she found out that how the dogs are being housed, she had no problem with their submittal also.
Under a current hobby kennel license, how many dogs can they have?
As many as they apply for. Well, not within reason, but,
So if they get a fourth dog, they have to come back and apply for,
yeah, they're asking for 3. That's correct. They're only asking for 3, no more than 3.
so they can't have, get all of a sudden, dog
Right.
can't keep growing.
And I did draft, I know you saw it very late, conditions for a hobby kennel license that would be, that the petitioner would be able to read, and you'd put conditions on, and then that would, in their petition, they stated they don't want to do any type of breeding. They only want 3 animals. There's no outside kennel, and all those would be conditions of your approval.
Right, in the request here, it says that it'll be 3 dogs, a Beagle Heeler mix, a Boxer Bulldog mix.
That's the other one.
That's the different.
Okay. The Australian Cattle mix,
There you go.
the Golden Retriever, and a Border Collie.
The Golden Retriever Border Collie is mixed, and then it's a Husky is the third one.
What do you want to do, Commissioner?
I have no problem authorizing approval for a hobby kennel license.
I do have one question. Are there any current, because of living in other areas, any current restrictions on any breeds at this moment? And then,
We do not.
I commend you that you come forward and want to get a license because so many people don't.
And the first I looked at when we closed on our house was the dog license law.
Going well. Any comments, concerns?
Well, I would just say I see no issue here. They've come to us, broken everything down, including dog types, dog breeds. The only question I have for Sean is if they decide to do a kennel later, they have to come back for a special permit for that?
A commercial kennel is different than a hobby kennel license.
Yeah, so what they're asking for tonight is not even in the zoning ordinance.
Right.
This is a separate ordinance altogether. If it was actually a kennel where they would raise and sell dogs, that's commercial, and that is a conditional use, and that's different.
Right. Hobby kennels allow breeding, very limited breeding, but they're not asking for that. So the draft that they'd look at and you look at would be predicated on the conditions that the plan commission would put in as a condition of approval.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to take a 4th dog? Yeah, but you'd have to take my wife.
No, the third dog was a surprise.
But he's a yapper. One dog, though.
I thought you were talking about one.
Oh.
Does your wife know about this, Gary?
Nope. Not yet.
She'll be waiting on the parking lot.
No, there's an annual fee.
And this is just plan commission action?
Right.
Is a side comment, Tom, from the town board member?
Sure.
For one thing, I appreciate the fact these people are coming in to do this. I know we have a lot of illegal people out there that are housing more than 3 animals, and they haven't come in for a plant committee, but for a hobby kennel license. So I appreciate the fact that these 2 individuals took it upon themselves to pay the extra money to have that extra hobby kennel license and to assure their neighbors that they're not going to be a problem. That's my only comment.
Bill, Merle, anything?
I'll make a motion to approve this.
Is it with the conditions that there be 3 dogs, that there's no breeding, that there's no outside kennel, the electric fence is installed and would be monitored on a yearly basis?
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any more discussion? Any more comments by the town board? Okay, plan commissioners, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
I'll email you something tomorrow, because you gotta read it. Thank you. It's from the other hobby kennel people.
Frank and Heidi Saikon, is that how you pronounce your last name? Saikon. Okay, this is a request to allow for 3 dogs. This is the Beagle Healer, the boxer, bulldog mix.
She's actually a bulldog with a boxer head, but she looks like a cartoon character.
And a mixed,
I'm sorry.
and a mixed breed.
And she's completely mixed. He's a Canardly. Canardly's not what he is.
Ms. Saitan, you're not proposing any outdoor kennel for your dogs?
No.
And the dogs will be outside for their entertainment purposes?
And I take baggies out with me every single time, because let me tell you, one dog poops about 7 times a day, the other 2 dogs poop twice a day. That's a lot of poop in one day. If you're not keeping up on that, you're going to have a big problem.
And all the neighbors on both these public meetings were notified, all neighbors within 300 feet. And I've got no phone calls, either opposed or in favor. So that's a good sign, because usually if they're opposed, they call. So.
I have a neighbor with me.
And I'm her next door neighbor, and I'm totally in favor. She's a great neighbor and a great.
And who are you, dear?
Pardon?
What's her name?
Julie.
Julie. What's your last name, Julie?
Castello.
Oh yeah, got it.
I also want to note that one of my dogs, I'm going to be starting to train her to be my service dog. We have to go through, currently I'm in like a soccer class with my older dog, just for fun, so he keeps moving. And my new foster, he has to wait till June, because we're treating him for an illness before he goes into any classes. But my boxer bulldog is going to be ideal for my PTSD dog.
So, comments, commissioners?
You're not planning on breeding?
No, hell no.
Did you want me to put hell in there?
They are all fixed. I got 1 girl and 2 boys.
Anything, commissioners?
I have no problem with the request.
Is there a motion then?
I'll make a motion to approve the hobby kennel license for
Frank and Heidi?
yeah, she's
Saitan.
Or you can call us chicken.
Is there a second, Merle?
Supervisor Mills, with the same conditions as stated previously. Thank you.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Opposed?
She was so nervous. I think she called me 8 times. Now, what am I doing? What should I wear? How should I do my hair?
What?
All right, minutes. Approval of minutes for March 13th. Wednesday, March 13th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from March 13th.
Second. Monroe, second. Five commissioners, all those in favor?
Aye.
Town board?
Second.
Eddie?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Okay, Gary?
Seconded, that's not Eddie.
Yeah.
Take your pick. Whatever. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Let's have it. That's it.
Well, we need a motion.
The what?
We need a motion to adjourn.
There is nothing on the agenda for that.
Oh, you guys gotta stay here, bye.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Plan commission? Make a motion to adjourn. Second.
I got
All
it.
those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 8:15:17.
Good night, all.
Thanks for coming, Darlene.
All right.
Oh,
I'm just at a fly on the wall, I was sitting here. Have a
So
good night.
let's talk as soon as possible.
So Karen was trying to schedule a never-ending meeting.
I'm sorry. I never even noticed that. It's like, oh my God.
Karen, my concern earlier was there's the Big Bend Fire Department, Big Bend Vernon Fire Department, works additionally on their oath report, and that's why I tried to interject it, but kept on going, we never came back to it.
When Sean comes back, we gotta, I wonder if he realizes we don't have it.
I wanna go chief, it's gone, so I don't know.
Oh, you know what, is that on Ralph's?
Yes, it's all on Ralph.
Okay, so let me go back to Ralph's. That's for the town, so that would be here.
I made the comment about it. I know that specifically one instance where there's people with 3 dogs.
Let me-
She's had for a couple of years, but nobody's complaining. And as long as they're not complaining.
First one's on page 5. Page 1.
The dogs at all, because she's afraid that.
Town of Vernon and Big Bend Fire Department.
Yeah, okay, got that.
And then 3 lines down from that, Big Bend Vernon Fire Department.
You know what he'll just do is a search. Okay.
Yeah. And then on page 6, first line, oh no, I'm sorry, go down to 12, Roman numeral 12B.
Yep, I got Big Bend Vernon
Go down to 14, Roman numeral McGuanago Chief. No one else came up on that, huh?
Nope.
Okay.
Who by the fire
That
chief?
was it then.
Who certifies them for service though?
So I figured, okay.
Yeah, so I